Let's go, friends.
Okay, I have to confirm it. So, yeah, good morning, good day, good afternoon to everyone. It's a great pleasure to let me welcome all of you to this World Conference, News World Conference of Retina International. For those of you who don't know me yet, my name is Franz Badura. I'm based in Bavaria, Germany. I'm not a youth person, I'm a middle-aged person, I'm 54, and I'm diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa cone rod dystrophy. I'm genotyped with a CRX mutation, for those of you who are able to understand these biological and medical terms. And so to say, I started my career with retinitis pigmentosa when I was about 15 or 16. And I'm involved in the issues of Retina International for a long time already. It was in 1990 when I visited the first Retina International World Conference, at that time in Dublin. Retina International, in my understanding, is a great institution, and we are delighted to have now an international NGO based in Dublin since 2 years now, nearly 2 years, and a strong, small but a strong and clever team in our office, and yeah, to bring forward our objectives, which are briefly said in 3 pillars: education, participation, and innovation. These are our 3 pillars. We try to engage people all over the world to encourage and to motivate, to engage for our necessary issues we have to tackle with. It's complicated because the national systems, especially the health systems, are so different to each other that it makes very difficult for an umbrella organization like Retina International to bring all interests streamlined. And but in my understanding, the basic interests and goals we all have as patients are exactly the same all over the world. And what Retina International makes so unique, in my understanding, is because we have a very strong and for many, many years, a strong link to research and science. And this is what brings hope to all of us, especially to you, the young ones. There are therapies already on the market, and there are a lot of hopefully successful treatments in the pipeline. But as all of you know, we have to tackle with the daily life now. And currently, most of us have no treatment. And we have, nevertheless, to do our jobs, to do our studying, everything else. And it's a challenge, of course. But I can promise you, for nearly 30 years experience, it's possible. It's really possible. You can do a successful life, a professional life. You have to arrange things a little bit in a different way, like others, but you can do a really successful personal and professional life. So thank you. I wish the conference a big success. Please apologize. I have to leave in some minutes because I have a parallel meeting I have to join. And now I will hand over to my colleague, David from Spain. And I try to engage tomorrow to listen to and to learn again. But please enjoy this year's conference and take care. Goodbye.
Thank you, Franz. Thank you very much to our chair, the chair of Retina International. Thank you very much. It's a really pleasure for me as well to give you this welcome to all of you. I'm going to introduce myself really quickly. I'm 48. I'm a bit younger than our chair. And I live with retinitis pigmentosa as well. My gene is the RPE65. I live in Spain. I'm the chair of FARPE, which is a national alliance here in Spain. We are full members of Retina International. And as Franz says and Laura says before, I'm the chair of the subcommittee of the engagement and membership subcommittee in Retina International. For us, for Retina International, as a global organization, a global umbrella organization that we are represented in all the continents around the world. It's a pleasure having you, all the young people and around the world with us in this 5th Retina International Youth Conference. We in Retina International, we usually work with English. The board of directors and our team usually work with English. But for us, approaching to all people around the world and having a multilingual and multicultural approach to all of you is really important. And in this case, in this meeting today, this plenary is going to be all in English, but tomorrow we are going to have three sessions, one in English, one in Spanish, and the last one in Portuguese. So for us, it's really important, this approach and these meetings in different languages in order to engage with all of you. Retina International is currently working in a new membership structure and in a new membership fee structure. For us, it's really important, and we hope in the 2024 Retina International World Congress, maybe we could have this new membership structure and new membership fee in order to engage lots of associations and new members from all around the world. I would like to give a big thank you to Laura Lopez Caraballo, our membership and engagement coordinator of Retina International, and as well to Marina Leite, the chair of the Retina International Youth Council. They are make a really great job. I hope this conference, I'm sure it's going to be a successful conference, and I hope all of you enjoy it. And that's all for my part. I hope we can keep connect today and tomorrow and have a great discussion related to all the things you are interested in. We know that young people are really important, and they are interested in different, they have a different perspective of all the things, and it's important for us to stay really close to you and listen to you and know what you are interested in. Thank you very much. And Laura, the next one, please.
Thank you, David and Franz. Next, we have Marina Leite, who is the chair of the Retina Youth Council, and as David said, the mastermind behind this cool and amazing conference.
Okay, good morning, everyone. It's really good to be here with you all in this morning or afternoon or evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Marina. I'm Brazilian, and as Laura mentioned, since October last year, I've been the chair of the Retina International Youth Council, and we worked hard to organize this conference, not just me and Laura, but all many members of the Youth Council. Some of them are present here today, and I believe you will have the chance to meet them online. Just briefly, I would like to remember you all to use the chat if you want to send messages, interactions, or questions. You can also enable the captions. It's all on the toolbar here on Zoom if you want to read to help you to understand. And please know that this is a safe space for us. Today, as David mentioned, the Youth Council has this idea of bringing together many different topics. So we hope you enjoy seeing a little bit about social life, daily life, gaming, and of course, a lot of scientific talks. Tomorrow, I believe we also have an amazing panel on lived experience and the sessions in specific language, as David mentioned. We will run a session in Spanish and another in Portuguese. So please stay with us today and tomorrow. I'm sure we will all have a good time. Briefly about the Retina International Youth Council. The idea of having a youth council inside Retina International exists for a couple of years. And recently, on the last few years, it has gained a structure. Now we have a terms of reference, which we approved last year on the end of 2022. And the purpose of having a youth council inside Retina International is to support Retina International in all its activities and also elevate the voice of the youth community living with inherited retinal disease. I haven't mentioned that, but I'm also a person with inherited retinal disease. I have Stargardt disease, and I was diagnosed when I was 12. I am one of these ABCA4 persons. We are a lot of ABCA4s, I believe, in the Retina International community, and I am one of them. We also, the Youth Council has a purpose to identify what are the needs of the youth community and support to build future leaderships, because we understand this is a work for the present and also for the future. Today we have 18 members from 12 different members of Retina International. So 12 different associations have nominated youth members to participate in the council. Each Retina International organization can nominate up to 2 young adults to participate between the ages of 18 to 35. And if you want to be part of the Youth Council, I really recommend it. I believe it's an excellent opportunity to be part of a great work, to learn, to develop yourself, and of course, to make a lot of friendships. I believe networking is an important part of the Youth Council. So if you are a member of Retina International Patient Association, please reach out to your local leadership and mention that you would like to be part of Retina International. You must be between 18 to 35 years old and be someone with an inherited retinal disease, with a retinal disease, or be a parent, a friend of someone living with inherited retinal disease. So please come join us. The council wants to grow each year a little bit more. But this is for now for me. I hope you enjoy the conference. And if you have any questions, as I mentioned, do not hesitate, use the chat or raise your hand. Please enjoy this event. We work hard to make it as pleasant and enjoyable and learnful for all of us. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Marina. And next we have a few words from Avril Daly, who is the CEO of Retina International. So Avril, whenever you're ready.
Okay, I hope you can hear me. I'm here in the same office with Laura, so we're hoping that we don't have any feedback and you can hear us clearly. My name is Avril Daly. I'm the CEO of Retina International, and I'm absolutely delighted that this day has come, and we have so many of you online. 182 participants have registered for this Congress, and I think that just demonstrates the value and the importance of being able to have a platform where we can have discussions, where you can have discussions about what your needs are, listen to science, listen to people's experiences of their day-to-day lives living with retinal degenerations, what matters to them, what matters now, what's going to matter into the future. That's really important for us in Retina International. As Franz and David have already said, Retina International is an umbrella organization. We have members all over the world on all continents, representing various different cultures, languages, and traditions. And a lot of us in this community who are affected by retinal degenerations will have the same issues regardless of where we live. The fundamental issues of losing sight are universal, but challenges can be different from one country to another. And that's something that we must recognize and listen to as a global organization. It's very important to listen. And because when you listen, then you can really learn what the issues are and work with our membership to lead out on making positive change. As Franz will have said, Retina International's members were founded, and really the rationale was to work together, to invest in research and innovation in order to bring about treatments and cures that can have a positive impact on people's lives. Research has gone from strength to strength in the many decades since Retina International was formed in 1978. And now we do have treatments, but not all of them are available. And that's a frustration to us. There are some very exciting pipelines of research, and there's going to be a lot of work needed by this community in order to get access to the potential therapies that we know will have an impact on all of our lives. But while we wait for access to therapies, we have to live in the real world, in the day-to-day, as we say here in Ireland, back at the ranch. What happens back at the ranch? What happens day to day? What can we do as a community to work together to improve our access to diagnosis, access to care, be that social care or health care, but also to our mental health, to ensuring that we have the services that can help for other issues that do arise as a consequence of daily living for any person, but also those extra challenges that people living with vision impairment have to face. So these are areas that we are concerned with. But I think today it's really about you. It's about learning about your social interactions, your networking, relationships, careers, all of these issues that really are relevant on a day-to-day basis as we wait for the potential that innovation and research can bring us. So we are delighted to be able to provide this platform as Retina International. The future of this organization is you. We want to listen to you. We want to hear what you have to say today and into the future. We have had a Retina Youth program for many, many years where our members met every 2 years at our congresses. In 2018, it was really felt by the group that met in New Zealand that there was more that we could do. And that's where the council was formed out of. We hoped that in 2020, at the RIYWC Retina International World Congress, we would be able to launch the Retina Youth Council, but we all know what happened in 2020, and we had to put our thinking caps on and find other ways to communicate. And thankfully, technology has really helped us to be able to have that 2020 Congress online, be able to have another one in 2021, and be able to meet in person last year in Reykjavik, have our conference today, and then plan for our Retina International World Congress in June, which will take place here in Dublin. And we hope that we can work with you to ensure that we develop a program that is developed for you, by you. So we want to hear more from you, not just today, but going forward. I really want to thank the team that's been behind organizing this event, Lara here in the office and Nabeen. And also, I really want to thank our board member, David Sanchez, who has been a real driving force to ensure that we provide these platforms and we provide them in the most accessible way from a linguistic perspective to be as inclusive as possible. And I think this conference really demonstrates that. But I also want to thank our youth group, our youth council, for their incredible work that they have done. And in particular, Marina Lette, who has really worked tirelessly to make sure that this happens. And remember, there's 3 strands of this conference. It takes a lot for a person who is a volunteer. So thanks so much, Marina, and to all of you involved in the Retina Youth Council for bringing us to this day. It's really motivating for us here in the team. There's a few of us here in the office in Dublin here today, listening in and really, really motivated in our work because of you. So thank you so much, and I wish you a fantastic conference. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Avril. Sorry, I was just trying to see if I had anybody in the waiting room, and I think everybody's here. Great. So now we're gonna go for our first group discussion, which I'm delighted to be the moderator for. It holds significant importance in opening up new perspectives and insights into our day-to-day lives, as everybody else has mentioned. We're here to create an environment that's both respectful and inclusive, where all voices are valued. Before we dive into the discussion on the impact of social media on networking, connections, and career building, I want to briefly mention our goal. That is to gather a diverse range of perspectives, as I said, so please feel free to participate actively, as your insights and experiences are highly valued. I will now leave you with Jess McQueen, who lives with RP in New Zealand and is a member of the Retina Youth Council, to talk about her experiences. So whenever you're ready, Jessie.
Great, thank you, Laura, and hello, everyone. So yes, I'm Jess, and I live in New Zealand. And yeah, today I'll be talking about social media and how we can best use it in our everyday lives. So as we all know, social media is being used in so many different ways around the world. And I'd like to discuss how it can be an excellent tool for finding a job, networking, meeting new people, and keeping connected with the world. Living with a retinal disease means that we have unique perspectives and challenges, and we'll discuss these a bit later. But first, we'll talk about how social media can be utilized in building a career by connecting with individuals, organizations, and groups. Through developing an online presence, you can develop your brand that sets you apart from the rest on a national and international scale, allowing access to more opportunities than ever before. To do this, it's important to think about who you are, your goals, how you want to be seen online, and what platforms you choose to be on. You've got to ask yourself, what can you do? What skills and experiences do you have? What can you as an individual provide or produce? Are there projects that you are currently working on that you can share? What are you involved in that is related to your field? How can you show that you are up to date in your area? Are there recent articles or events that you can share? Who is your target audience? Are you looking to network or reach potential employers, or both? For those living with low vision, particularly vision which is degenerative, finding a job can be tricky. It really helps to create a solid brand for yourself and promote yourself to potential employers. Be bold and put your brand out there. So let's open up the floor to discuss some questions thinking of building your career using social media. Feel free to raise your hand and share your thoughts. So how have you found developing your personal brand for your career? Is it something you have thought about before today?
Our next panel on accessible gaming, being a blind or low vision person, with Janine Sutter, who is another Retina Youth Council member, and Mike Shipper, who is a web shop retailer. So whenever you guys are ready.
Hello, everyone. As Laura mentioned, I'm Janine Sutter, and I'm very pleased to have a talk with Mike today. Mike, would you like to introduce yourself? Are you here? That's maybe the first question. I haven't seen him on the list yet.
Yeah, he's here. I see him in the participant list.
Okay. But still muted. Mike?
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, hi.
There we are. Hi.
Nice to see you today. So
Yes, I will put it back on my headphones for a moment.
okay.
So now we're back. I was going with the controls. So yeah,
who are you?
I'm Mike. I'm 29 years old. I'm working as a web shop retailer, and in my spare time, I prefer to game a lot with the Nintendo Switch and all the game consoles that are available.
And so I get that you're visually impaired. So do you
Yes.
have some vision left, or are you
No, it
completely
is
blind?
it is all total blackness from 15 years now. So
Okay.
it's total blackness.
So you're used to 15 years of blind gaming.
Not exactly 15 years, but it's getting close to 10 years now.
Mhm. Okay. And you are also active on YouTube, right? What do you do
Yes.
on YouTube?
I play various games like Forza Motorsport, Forza Horizon, various fighting games, Pokemon games, all that kind of gaming videos I record and edit afterwards and post on YouTube.
Okay. I will share after our talk the link to your channel in the chat.
Sure.
So you already mentioned some of your favorite games. So is there kind of a certain game style you prefer, or are you more like the crossover type?
I mostly play everything I can lay my hands upon, but it really depends on the mood I am in. If I am somewhat frustrated, I choose a fighter which is easygoing and I will win easily then. When I'm some more into some different mood, I will play something different. It really depends on the mood I'm in.
Okay. And I think what a lot of gamers here today probably interest is one of the difficult part is at the beginning. You know, when you see new games arrive and are launched, then you're always wondering, will I be able to play that? How do you have any strategies how to decide if a game is worth trying, or how do you decide what to play?
Well, it is kind of a lengthy procedure. It is mostly that I'm browsing through the various names and I select the names that interest me most. From that point on, I do some Google searches if there are any accessibility features inside it, mostly for the blind then, like TTS and navigation assistant and that kind of stuff. I read reviews about the game. I watch Let's Plays on YouTube to see if what I can, between quotes, see in the video is matches up with the skills I know I have. It is a quite lengthy procedure, but when the answer on all of my questions is yes, then I will just buy it and risk being disappointed and that the game actually isn't playable. But mostly I lay what I can see in YouTube videos alongside the skills I have.
Okay. What kind of skills are your professional most?
For example, your ability to hear positional audio, that you can locate where audio is coming from. The skill of audio memory. When a certain sound plays, it does have that kind of result. For example, just the memory of what certain bleeps or bips or what kind of sound means. Navigational skills, for example, when you easily get lost in the neighborhood, then it possibly isn't the best thing to play RPGs, for example, because it requires a lot of walking. All that kind of stuff. That kind of skills I'm talking about. It really can be in quite broad availability of skills that someone can develop.
So that would mean before you start looking for games, you should be aware of what kind of skills we have. Like, yeah, if you're good at mental mapping, or if you have, a good reaction, fast reaction. Like, for example, for me, that would never work out. My reaction is really poor, but my mental mapping is good, so I'm a lot into RPGs.
Yeah. Well, and it also is if you're up for a challenge, you also can decide if the skills you don't have to grade yet, if it still is acceptable to work with it. You also not everything is possible in every game, so it really is also something that and any mainstream gamer should get along with. And that really is a skill that is really helpful, that to admit that something isn't as easy or not possible at all.
Yeah. How do you deal with this frustration sometimes when you realize, okay, I bought a game and it's not gonna work out?
In the past, I got really pissed off about it because it is for 40 euros, for example, and it is just wasted. Over time, I learned to shrug it off. It is something that happens in this world, in the mainstream gamers world, as a blind guy. And the best advice I can give is just shrug it off and sell it to someone to at least recuperate some of the funds you did put into it, and just continue looking for a different game. It is the big loss in any way.
But I hear it oftentimes from people who are visually impaired, or maybe at the beginning, for example, with our kind of degenerating diseases, where people in the beginning they get diagnosed and they're still able to play, and over time the vision gets worse and it becomes frustrating, and so most people stop playing or don't fight themselves through those hard times where you're trying and not succeeding at the beginning.
Well, in all honesty, I'm blind for 15 years now. I was fully sighted, and it was kind of frustrating to realize that I possibly couldn't game anymore. I'm doing it again, I should say. I'm not still doing it. I'm doing it again, and it really helped me. Getting through one of the worst parts of my life, which was a depression in 2018, and it really helped me to pass the time, to escape into a different reality at some point. So I completely get it, because when you lose your sight, it can be kind of depressing, but it is still possible, and there's still very much possible in the mainstream gaming market if you know where to look for. And that really is dependable on every individual, because my skills are something, for example, not something one of my friends is capable of doing. And his skills are not my skills. So it is really dependable on the individual.
Yeah, that's true. Besides that, everybody has their own skills.
Yeah.
Do you have any tips or strategies what helps with gaming games that are maybe sometimes partially accessible but not completely? How do you
If you wish to start in this world, then I really recommend starting with games, for example, Mortal Kombat. There's really 2D audio, so you only have to move left or right, and you can get the basic skills of localizing your enemy and determining if you get hit or you hit your enemy. That's really a starting point for most gamers, by starting with fighters, and that's mostly Mortal Kombat or Killer Instinct, and that kind of games are good to start with.
Just run and hit.
Yeah, just run and hit, and just be very happy that you won, or get awfully frustrated when you get beat up.
Okay, it's also for the good experience. Sometimes you win by luck in those games, so at least you have had a rewarding experience.
In all honesty, my first wins with Mortal Kombat were more strokes of luck than actually skill.
Well, isn't that normal with Mortal Kombat?
Well, one of my friends really did beat me up, but Mortal Kombat has more of positional audio, and Killer Instinct is more like a beat 'em up. So with the beat 'em ups, I was very good. With Mortal Kombat, I really got wrecked.
Really nice. I would also like to hear, do you have some special equipment? I mean, if you have to adjust also strategies to be able, maybe some special equipment could help as well?
When you wish to position the audio more accurately, then a good headset will do the trick for sure. Mostly the gaming headsets are very variable in pricing. but most of them do have very good audio. And be warned though, because when someone calls your name, that you won't hear it at any time. It is happened more often to me ook.
And do you prefer console or PC, or is there a console that is very accessible or has very accessible games more than others?
Well, the console that really has the most games which are designed with blind accessibility in mind, at least, is the PlayStation 5, with games of Last of Us Part 1 and Last of Us Part 2, and also God of War Ragnarok does have very good blind accessibility features. And there's also the Xbox, which has the Forza Motorsport games that has driving assistance and a speech narrator that tells you the menus. But again, this also is dependent on where someone's interest lies. But when it comes down to the most accessible games, I would really suggest the PS5 in that for that matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we also getting the newest console.
What?
We should get the newest console on PS5.
Well, actually, the availability is far better than it was a year ago.
Mm-hmm. But what about, me personally? I had a lot of struggles with playing on console compared to PC, because on PC there were just tons of mods, or in case there is no mod, you still could use the in-game console and cheat, which I sometimes did, like, using the blind person free card, like it's okay if I cheat because I'm visually impaired.
I like those world cards.
Yeah, they're very useful sometimes. So that's something that made, I'm a console gamer as well, but for me that looked like an average, that games are easier to modify on PC than on console.
Yeah, and there also was a very big advantage for the PC, because the screen reader is mainly always present, and you can still use several functionality of your screen reading software to read out certain parts of the screen. But on Xbox and PlayStation and Nintendo Switch, there are more extreme methods to be able to do that. So PC is far easier in terms of setup and inclusivity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And for your personal life, you already mentioned it helped you gaming. Well, starting to game again helped you through a very hard time.
Yeah.
What other advantages do you see, or maybe also disadvantages, with gaming for visually impaired people? What is it to your life?
For me personally, all my other friends I have at the moment, I did meet, in fact, through gaming. My girlfriend, for example, I did meet also via a game. So most of my social life is formed by people I did meet through gaming. So it is a very good thing for the social life as well.
That is a very interesting big point, because usually gamers are seen as very unsocial people sitting alone at home. And that means for visually impaired people, it could be a good way, because it's virtual. Like with this conference, you don't have to get somewhere in person. It could be a more easy way to meet people.
Yeah.
In that way. So when looking on the clock, I'm coming to my last question already, which is actually a big one, having a look to the future. The gaming industry. Well, some of them are realizing that there are more people out there wishing to play their games and are not able yet to. What's your opinion? Where does the future go with the gaming industry for visually impaired people?
I really think that the gaming industry is heading the right way. So in that with inclusivity, not only with blind inclusivity, but also visually impaired and motor disabilities, and that all the forms of disabilities do get inclusion. They are on a good way already, but there's still a long way to go. And if there are people that keep informing them about trouble they have with their games or anything, then I really think the game industry will at some point become a very inclusive thing in life.
What would you then say? Sometimes, well, as a visually impaired person, you probably hear that many times, like adding something extra for the few visually impaired person who will use this. It's too expensive.
Mhm.
What would you say to them?
It probably is too expensive at first, but when they take the funds to at least do it and build some kind of foundation for upcoming titles, it actually can become profitable for them. So big spending can actually become big income when they do it right.
If just all the visually impaired people on the planet will be able to have access to the games.
Not specifically, but for example, the Madden NFL games that that got the Blind Accessible Foundation in part 18, and for now EA Electronic Arts is now earning more than spending for the accessibility features. So it really has an upswing for them.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but there's a question on the chat.
Thanks for interrupting.
Yeah, of course.
Sorry.
There's a question
No,
on the
it's okay.
chat. Can you read it?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Mhm.
It's what are your tips for a low vision / blind young person who wants to start playing some games?
How young do we speak of?
I feel maybe all young, just between the ages of 12, 13, maybe
Okay, get it.
like teenager, tween teenager.
But do you mean then, for example, game examples or something different?
Maybe both.
Maybe
If you
both?
have games, that's very welcome. Just mentioning, we also in afterwards we will post a list of mostly
I was
accessible
gonna
games.
say as well, there is a list that you shared with me yesterday that I was gonna send with all of you after the conference. I was reading up. There's one called Stardew Valley, which is one of my favorite games actually.
Yeah.
So it's very lovely to see that it is pretty much accessible with a mod
With mods indeed.
modification. Yeah. But yeah, I think the question was more made by Marina, so if she wanted to say something really quickly before we go to our break.
Sure. I was just asking maybe for people who are attending us today or participating, if they want to start playing enough games, but what would be a general tip for them? How can I start playing a game? How they can access the accessible features on the game? Just general tips.
That's a very good one. And I am afraid I don't have an answer right away because I need to process the question and come up with a good answer. But a good solution probably is then is it an idea I share my email address, so when there are specific questions from the participants that I can answer them directly.
Sure.
I would say in general, it's for me at the beginning, it was lots of reading. I mean, as a sighted person, you buy a game, you insert it in your console and start. And as we had it first, it starts with what game am I able to play. So first you have to be aware of your skills and then check the games. And then again, read. I read a lot through forums because when it comes to accessibility, for example, you have to install mods. So you have to know what at all is a mod. So if you were never a gamer, you have this whole gamer vocabulary. You have to get used to that first, because gaming as a visually impaired person is probably a bit more advanced. You have to have a bit more advanced computer skills maybe than someone that just plug and plays.
Well, and in all honesty, I usually don't use mods too often. In most games I use is Hearthstone and World of Warcraft. Those are the only mods I use, but it's definitely a lot of reading and looking up to and watching Let's Plays and all that kind of stuff. It's a hell of a lot more preparation than just buying the game, indeed.
Yeah. But
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much, Janine and Mike. This was very informative. As someone who just socially plays video games, I think this is very nice to share with my other gaming friends.
You're welcome.
So now we'll go for a nice little 20-minute break. So I'll see you guys in 20 minutes. I think that would be sorry, I'm in Irish time. It would be at 1:43, 1:44. Let's do 1:45. Yeah? All right, cool.
Do you want to wait 2 minutes more or we start?
I'd wait. Yeah, let's wait like maybe 2 more minutes just in case.
Perfect.
That's okay. I think we can start.
Okay. Okay.
Cool. Welcome back, guys. We will now have a scientific panel to talk about the present and the future of IRDs. PhD student Maria Jose Ruiz will be the moderator. She's from the Neurovis group at the University of Alicante. And our panelists are Dr. Jocelyn Jolly, who is an optometrist working at the Vision and Eye Research Institute in Cambridge, and Yelena Malinina, who is the data director at Eurordis. So I'll leave it to you, Maria.
Okay, I would like also to introduce both speakers a bit deeply. The first of the speakers, Jocelyn, she's a senior clinical research fellow in the University of Oxford. More specifically, she's working at the Nuffield Laboratory of Ophthalmology and Wellcome Interactive Neuroimaging Center, but she is also working at the Oxford Eye Hospital. She is actively involved in clinical research in the fields of retinal gene therapy, surgical outcomes, and low vision. Her main interest is improving outcome measures following interventions for ophthalmic diseases and clinical translational research. So, Jocelyn, when you want, let's start.
Hello, thank you, Maria. So I've actually moved from Oxford. I'm now in Cambridge as an associate professor at the Vision and Eye Research Institute. So the topic is about the future of IRD research. And a big problem with IRD research at the moment is the problem of outcome measures, because a lot of the trials are not meeting the pre-specified outcome measures. And a key point of this is that necessarily using the most appropriate outcome measures. And this is where collaborations with patient groups, I think, is going to be really, really valuable to come in. So it'd be great to have a wider discussion as to how to make that happen.
Do I introduce to Yelena? And then we go with the questions. Laura? Do I introduce Yelena and then we go with the questions?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay. Yelena Malinina studied a bachelor's degree in public administration in the Mykolas Romery University in Lithuania and a master's degree in European Studies in the University of Gothenburg in Sweden. She joined Eurordis as data director. Eurordis is a non-profit alliance of over 1,000 rare disease patient organizations from 74 countries. She's an expert in healthcare digitalization, personal health data protection and security, and healthcare systems innovation.
Thank you.
Okay. I have some questions. Meanwhile, people do something in the chat, or if they want to speak, leave. The first question is that a challenge we face today when working on clinical trials for ERD is to define endpoints. What outcomes are expected and how we should measure them. Given that, how do you believe the community should be working around it? How can patients contribute? Do you believe patients are not aware of this issue? How can we move towards effective patients' participation?
Shall I go first?
Yes, for example, yeah.
Okay, so one of the problems we have at the moment is the field of outcome measures is not considered in the same scientific way as the development of the therapies. So we spend millions on developing these amazing therapies, but unless you can prove that they work, they will never get translated into patient care. And measurement is just as critical in that process of proving it. So we look at the development of the therapy scientifically, we look at the delivering of the therapy scientifically, whether it's an operation, how the gene therapy vectors, etc. But then when it comes to measurement, people tend to use old scale tests that have been around for a long time, were not necessarily designed for what we want to actually measure. And all the science goes out the window. And then those of us who have the expertise and are actually focused on answering these questions as to how to do the measurement don't get treated in the same way, because our branch of science is not given the same respect, the same importance. And even when we're brought on board, it's often far too late during the process. So we need a huge fundamental shift in attitudes from funding bodies, from the pharma companies, from clinical trials teams, from everybody, if we're going to change the way this is done. So vision scientists who specialize in measurements and designing good measurement outcome measures, who can optimize these, need to work more closely with the clinical trials teams and pharmaceuticals. More of those who have this expertise actually need to be sat on these panels. And I would love to see more actual researchers, some more scientists who are visually impaired themselves, because I think your voices are going to be super valuable at this stage, because you combine the scientific knowledge and the lived experience, and there's nothing more powerful than that. So I personally would love to host more scientists in training in my research group, but I think that there needs to be that shift across the board. Then in terms of patients, we need more people to take part in the research studies. So not just the trials. So the trials are where you have a potential treatment that we're testing out. But to do the trials, a huge amount of background work needs to go on. So, you know, understanding how to measure it, understanding what settings to use. So much work needs to happen in the background. And to do that, we need to do clinical studies, which don't necessarily have direct benefit for the individual taking part. But quite often it's difficult to get patients to take part in the studies because everyone wants to take part in the trials, the potential treatment options. So, but without that participation earlier on in the pipeline, we can't do the later stages. And when we run PPI panels, so patient participant involvement panels, to get feedback on, you know, how is this testing? If we're doing things in the dark, or especially when I'm altering things for maybe children, if we're doing things in the dark, and I know that's difficult for you, and if we change things that way, does that work for you? Or is there something else you could advise? Again, we need people to come forward and sit on these panels so that we can work together to make things as optimal as possible, both scientifically, but also from a comfort point of view for the individuals taking part. And all of that doesn't often have a tangible benefit for the individual that's there in the chair, but it needs to be a partnership. And it's only through those partnerships that we can really keep things moving and actually get things working.
You said something that I thought very interesting, that is like that we should have more feedback about the basic scientists and the clinical research, because sometimes you lack of the point of view of the basic research, but we also do from you, because it's like a bit that we do or experiments in ourselves and in our minds, but we lack of that point of view of what really the patients need and what really works on a human being.
Yeah, exactly. So after all of my studies, I always send out a summary at the end saying, oh, this is what we found out. Thank you so much for taking part. This is why it was so valuable. But I know not everyone does that. Just to show why it was so valuable. And I do a lot of talks for various vision loss societies around the country, again, just to show them how we're using their information and why it's so important. But people always want to just hear about the treatments. No one ever wants to hear about the nitty-gritty stuff, but actually that's just as important. And without doing that, we can't get to the more exciting bits further down the line. So, you know, that we really need to get that message across, because even the funding bodies don't see that. And it's harder to get funding to do outcome measure research. But if you're not doing that at the same time as people are testing the therapies in the animal models, then we're not going to be ready for when they're ready to test them in human participants. And that's when you end up in the situation we're in now, where a lot of the trials are not meeting their outcome measures because they're simply using the wrong outcome measures.
I don't know if Jelena wants to report something.
Yeah, I would like to add on the point on patient involvement as a patient representative on this panel. I think it's really, really critical, as in many other fields, to raise much more awareness as patient advocates, as patient representatives, organizations, and also individual patients, of the importance of patient involvement to define endpoints. Sometimes it's very difficult to explain. Some things are way too scientific for lay people, but it does not mean that their feedback should not be included, or they should not know, that it would be cool to be involved into that. And there is a delicate balance, of course, because the clinical trial process is quite standardized procedure. So there are many things which are predefined, but at the same time, it's very important to also take into consideration some individual situations, and for each clinical trial, it can be very different, since we're speaking about more personalized patient care, combining with some methodological standardization. And I think for that, it's very important to ensure consistency and reliability of data across different trial sites and participants. And standardization is absolutely crucial for maintaining the trial scientific integrity and comparability, while involving patients and patient advocacy groups in the endpoint selection process could actually ensure valuable insights into what outcomes are most meaningful to them. And this can lead in the end to more patient-centric endpoint definitions. But I think, as I mentioned in the very beginning, for that part, there is a critical need of first raising awareness among patient groups on the importance of this process. And second is giving tools, maybe building some capacity in patients on how to give that kind of feedback, because very often it's unknown, and sometimes if we're also speaking about clinical trials which are done at the cross-border level, combining different types of patients, sometimes it's limited to the ones who speak English. So the most educated ones, the most aware, while missing the rest of the group. So I think one of the ways is also to think about how to include as many different patients as possible, independent of their education level, or where they come from, or do they speak English or not. I know that it adds much more complexity for researchers as well, but this way I think the inclusivity would be much higher, and also it would again probably would result into better patient outcomes and more efficient measurement of endpoints.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think that this is an interesting point. Is that when you are defining the endpoints, if you can have a compromise between a personalized handling of the patient and a standardization of the method, because I guess that it's not only important to get in account the age, the genre of the patient or the clinical stage of the disease, but also like a little bit the personal situation. I mean, there is no two equal patients. Do you think that clinicians can adapt easily to the patients, or it's more like that they are more limited in this sense? Jasly, what is your opinion about this?
So, you mean in terms of understanding?
Yes, because if you can, when you are defining the outcomes and measurements, if you can't like be free to adapt to your patient, or it's more limited because you have to do everything in the same way, or for standardization of the methodology.
So, I mean, I'll give you a solid example. So everyone uses the visual acuity, which is how many letters you can see on the standardized letter chart. You can probably, oh no, it's not in this room, but I was going to say there's one behind me, but it's not in this room, it's next door. So the problem with the letter chart, everyone uses that and everyone immediately goes to the letter chart, but it only reflects the central 0.5 degrees of your retina. It's such a limited measure, but why does everyone use it? Oh, well, that's what everyone does. We can compare. Without actually thinking, is it the most appropriate thing? Is it appropriate to look at that limited part of the retina for the specific disease that you're studying? So that's standardization taken to the extreme. If we're just going to do the same as what everyone's always done, what's the point of doing any research? How are we ever meant to move forward? So this is what I mean about outcome measures not being treated scientifically. We need to be able to take as scientific an approach with outcome measures as we do with other aspects of the field and the development of therapies. So In some cases, visual acuity will absolutely be appropriate, but in most cases, it probably isn't. And so if we can use other aspects of visual function, because visual acuity is one aspect of how you see the world. It's one limited aspect of how everybody sees the world. If we can use other measures, and if we're given the freedom and the funding to explore those, and based on the actual genetics, I want to be able to predict, okay, that because you've got this gene, this is how it's going to behave biologically, and therefore it's going to have this impact on your visual function and how you see the world. And so that means that we need to use maybe XYZ test to measure your vision. And I then need funding to go out and standardize those tests for that patient population. And then that's ready. I've got my reference data, I've got my standardization procedure, I've adapted it to make sure the patients are comfortable during testing, and then it can be applied in a clinical trial setting in a standardized way at any site across the world. And those tests will then be suitable for a range of genetic conditions and other conditions that all have the same impact on the visual function. Mm-hmm. So that's how we need to be approaching outcome measures. And that's not what we're doing at the moment. So we've taken standardization too far by saying we have to do the letters because that's what everyone's always ever done for the last 60 years and no one must change. But we need a happy medium. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. If I did not understand badly that you say that you used to measure visual acuity, and that maybe that is a pretty simple measure. How will you complement, for example, with which other techniques will you use for complement this measure to get a more complete view of the visual function of the patients?
It depends on the condition. So visual fields are always good, but even visual acuity is not that simple. Because there are different types of visual acuity, there are different charts you can use, the methodology used and how it interacts with someone's blind spots changes the accuracy of the results. And we've done research on all of this and shown it's not as straightforward as you think it is. How you score it changes the reliability of the result. What kind of statistics you do with it changes changes as well. So actually it's not just the measurement, but it's all the analysis side of it that needs to be standardized as well. Same with visual fields. What test do you use? How do you analyze it? Do you use just the mean threshold, which is what is standard in clinical practice? But actually that's not very appropriate because it's skewed really easily by large blind spots. So what we've shown is that using volumetric analysis is way more accurate in many of the conditions that we're studying. And so now we're trying to get that more widely implemented across teams across the world. So there's a lot of complications, and another field of research has shown that the instructions you give changes the accuracy of the results you get out, the background lighting levels. Then there's lots of other tests you can do, like if someone's got a rod cone dystrophy, so retinitis pigmentosa, for example, the first the first symptoms you get are problems with night vision. So why not use tests that actually target the rod cells, the low light vision, the night vision? Let's tackle the problems that people are actually experiencing. Let's focus on mobility, whereas in Stargardt it's more about central vision and details. So we want to hone in on the tests that are about details and that side of things. So it could be color vision, it could be reading. So this is what I mean is we need to not just use the same test in every scenario because it's not going to be appropriate. We need to look at what problems are being experienced and then try and hone in on that, look at what the therapy is actually targeting biologically, and what impact is that going to have visually. Because if you're not going to measure the impact of the biological change, then you're never going to be able to prove that therapy. And quite often with gene therapies, for example, we're not even looking for improvements, we're looking for stabilization. So having natural history with the tests that we propose and making sure that they can pick up those changes, those subtle changes over time, and we know the exact changes, so that in the gene therapy, we can see if there's any deviation from natural history in that stabilization.
Yes, I totally agree that we should use more logics and not follow always what we read in the literature blindly. And I think that in this point it's also very important to know what the mechanisms of the disease, to understand patients' symptomatology. And also about the analysis that you told, I also agree, because we in the literature, we used to describe very well the techniques that we use, but we never tell deeply how we did the analysis. And the analysis is pretty critical when you are getting the data, and even that the person that is analyzing the data can interfere on the results that you get. So this is a very important point, and I think that scientific community should work more on this aspect.
Yeah, and even the reliability metrics we use, a lot of those in visual field, for example, have been used from glaucoma. That's not necessarily appropriate, because someone who can't see the center of the target that you're trying to get them to look at, their eyes are going to be moving around more. So we need to either make changes to make it easier for them to keep looking in one place, or be able to monitor the how much the eyes are moving and adjust the reliability scores accordingly, and then take that account into analysis. So it's all a lot more complicated than people realize.
Yeah. There is a question in the chat. It's from Marina. Marina, maybe you wanted to, because I saw an emoji of a hand, but I didn't know that this was like you wanted to tell something.
I was just congratulating, saying that discussion
okay.
more like a comment. Keep going.
Do you want me to read your comment in the chat, or do you want to?
No, my point was just that I believe this discussion, it's been amazing, and I believe as a patient, the point of educating yourselves, it's crucial for having all those discussions. At the same time, I completely understand the point of working effectively together, and how can we effectively work together as patients, as researchers, etc., because we are on this together. Another aspect that I was wondering here, when I was doing my master's, and we studied a lot of this transactionality and how different fields can work together, and I believe it's something about that as well. How can we learn together because patients, they have so many different skill sets to bring to the table. So how can the challenge might be to get people connecting with each other and educating ourselves about the importance of this, and really listening. Sometimes you use the words co-participation, co-something, another thing, using a lot of things from design, but how can we effectively create a co-participation? Maybe that's the challenge that we are facing, but I'm loving the discussions and listen to it. Go ahead.
Thank you, Marina. I would love to see more visually impaired scientists. I really would. So I would absolutely love to see more visually impaired scientists, and I would love to work with more of you. And there are articles published in Nature about the benefits of the patient researcher. I think that would bring a huge benefit to the field. Mike, you've got your hand up.
One moment, as we don't have
Sorry.
a lot of time. I have here a question that I think that is more for Jelena. Then we, in the rest of time, we keep talking about this, because everything is like so interesting. Data owing and transferring, it is another issue or community faces, and it is definitely something we must reflect on in the future. So in this context, what role should patient associations play to ensure that data is safe and can be used to promote development and access? And from an individual perspective, what can the patients with an ERD can do?
I will start a bit from a bit more provocative comment on data ownership. So first, I think every individual and every patient should realize, and research as well, that we do not owe our data in legal terms. So legally, if we go, of course, it's a matter of choosing the right word for that. But when we owe something, so for instance, if I owe a car or a house, I can transfer my ownership rights to someone else. In data, I don't really owe it in a sense that I cannot give it to anyone else. I cannot give it the ownership rights to my data to anyone else. If I write you, if I go to the notary and write a document and give you my car, which I don't have, you will be the owner of my car, but it can never happen with data. And I think it's very important mind shift from not owning it, but rather sharing. I can choose to share it, so I can, it's the same, it's easy to distinguish because it's something which our body produces, which our existence produces, the data. I cannot sell myself, I cannot sell my body, I can share it. So we can, think from that terms, which brings us to the fact of that what we share, we can control more. Since I'm not giving my rights to anyone, I'm not transferring it fully, I'm the one in charge of what happens. So what is really, really important in all this process when it comes to participation in clinical trials, in different types of activities linked to research, is to really understand quite well what your rights are. It can differ from country to country, depending where you live. If we're speaking about the European Union, there is this general data protection regulation, which we are all subject of, which is protecting us. And companies, researchers are also subject of that. But the tricky part is that medical research is mostly subject of national law. So in every country, there would be some differences of what can be done and some limitations and some additional protections, or it might be a different regime. So from a patient perspective, depending where you live, it's very important to be aware of what your rights are and what researchers' responsibilities are. Patients also have responsibilities, of course, but usually we do speak about the rights, since data is shared. It can also be subject of clinical trials regulation if we're speaking about clinical trials specifically. So knowing all these points, and again, I'm coming back again to the point of education, that it's very important to know as much as you can. I know that usually it does not come as the first thing, because there are more important things to care, such as having more information about your condition, about knowing more about potential treatments or new therapies being developed. This is, of course, very important, but at the same time, since we live in an era where more and more data is used, it's hyper important to know all these things, or at least the basis, so you can protect yourself. Of course, the system exists also to protect you and all of us, but as we know, systems are not always how they should be on paper. The reality can be very different. I think also patient organization can play a significant role in that by letting people know in a lay way of what it means, because again, it's very technical thing. It's another thing which patients should know, and we cannot expect every person to have PhD in data science or anything like that. No, it's not possible and not needed. But I think, again, raising awareness and knowing the basics would be super helpful in that regard.
And Well, this is a topic on the rise, and not only when we talk about ERD research. It's a
Yeah.
topic that is affecting to every aspect of our modern lives, no? Right? And do you think that that the public health systems can have also a role in protecting the data from the patients, and how can they do with all this?
Yeah, I think so. It would depend actually in the future quite a bit on what will happen with how health data is regulated, because for the moment there are quite many new legislations coming up to set up a new order, how it will look like. But certainly, yes, I think any entity can play a role, and also any stakeholder can play a role in that, because there are certain aspects which we should follow. And I think, yeah, there is a definitely the place to do that. But how it will look exactly, it would depend a bit, on how the regulatory environment will work. It's currently being set up for this.
Yeah. I don't know if anybody wants to tell something about this topic.
I think Mike had something to say earlier, but I don't know.
Oh yes, I think that Mike wanted to talk. Mike Smith. We can't hear you. Maybe you have to switch on your microphone. We wait for you. Don't worry.
Sorry, there you go. I was just with regard to the sorry, it's late here. The outcomes, and I agree. Looking at some of those outcomes as it's challenging to get meaningful outcomes. I was wondering whether the panelists had any comment on the work that Dr. Lauren Ayton and her team are doing in Australia around, if I can kind of paraphrase it, essentially, rather than doing metric outcomes, they were looking at, with the bionic eye and stuff, when people did a mobility course before and after, and then they could kind of measure the effect of the treatment or how it affected their ability to actually, in real world terms, maneuver their way around their environment. Is that sort of thing that you're talking about in terms of, having better outcomes, or are you thinking just specifically in metric terms, like in, lines on a chart, or having specific, using those metric terms, but a bigger range of them?
Yeah, so I know Lauren and the team very well. I've been working with her for many years, and I was actually in Melbourne just a few weeks ago for a couple of months. So we work very, very closely together, and we need to use a variety of approaches. Just charts is never going to be sufficient. So we need to be, especially when we get to the low vision end, so the very low vision end, which is what was being used in the bionic eye project. And when I was in Oxford, I was involved in the retina implant trials, which used a similar group of patients. And then in future, with the optogenetics work, is going to be targeting that group of patients. So that's where we bring in the more real world tests, so mobility courses, identifying objects on the table. And again, there has been some great work done around these about how to target them. In fact, the first gene therapy that's been approved worldwide, so the Luxturna for the RP65, was actually approved on the basis of a mobility course. So their mobility course is now commercially available, but there's a limit within which visions you can use it. And also you need quite a lot of space to be able to use it. So there are a number of us who are working on alternative approaches to try and see if we can make something that would be easier to implement, because not many centres have that level of space and that control over the lighting that you require for that specific maze. So yes, there are a lot of strategies being worked on, but as always, the biggest barrier we have is getting funding, because a lot of funding bodies, they want to fund the treatments, but they don't want to fund the outcome measures. It's not considered important enough in their priority when they do their goal setting.
Thank you.
Anybody else wants to share some issue? Well, if not, maybe we move on as it's the time.
Yep. Thank you guys so much. I just wanted to share that Avril posted a comment saying that our Retina International Education Hub will commence in October. And actually, Professor Jolly is in our faculty. So if anyone wants any information on that, just send me an email or a message on the chat. But other than that, I think we can start our other break, which is a 10-minute break. If everyone's okay with that?
Yeah, see you.
All right. See you guys in 10 minutes, guys.
Okay.
All right. All right, guys. So next and finally, we'll have Ben Shaberman and Dr. Nicolas Ponticos, who will talk about understanding the molecular pathways in retinal degeneration, the role of fatty acids, where Maria Jose will be the, oh my goodness, no, sorry, this is my confusion. Nope. Backtrack. A research update with Ben Shaberman first, but from the Foundation Fighting Blindness. I2Gene by Dr. Nicolas Ponticos at the Institute of Ophthalmology, and Understanding the Molecular Pathways in Retinal Degeneration, the Role of Fatty Acids in Retinal Degeneration by Maria Jose Ruiz from the Universidad de Alicante. So sorry, I got too excited. Ben, whenever you're ready.
Good morning, everyone. Well, it's morning here on the East Coast of the US. Can people who are able to see my slides okay? Are they up?
Yes, we see.
Great. Thank you. And I do have slides with images. I'll try to describe the meaningful things on the slides. And thank you to Retina International and the whole team for giving me an opportunity to talk about the status of research for inherited retinal diseases. It's really an exciting time. I have a lot of ground to cover in 15 minutes, so I'm going to move very quickly. But one comment I just wanted to make, just in the past week or two, we've had a number of new announcements of clinical trials and new partnerships, procures, treatments moving to TEA, Sparing Vision announcing the dosing of their first cohort, Etsena announcing launch of their X-linked retinoschisis clinical trial for their gene therapy. Just a lot of great things happening. And quickly, I just wanted to mention that overall, there are more than 45 clinical trials underway for emerging therapies. And what's equally exciting for us at the Foundation Fighting Blindness in the US is how much commercial activity our research and the research of the international community is attracting. We need investments from the biotech space, from the pharmaceutical space, to move things through clinical trials. So a lot of the great research that all of us are funding at the lab level and the translational level is attracting these investments. And that's just a really wonderful and cool thing. I just wanted to start out by briefly mentioning Luxturna, the first FDA-approved gene therapy for the eye or an inherited retinal condition. This is for people with mutations in the gene RPE65. Usually when that's mutated, it causes a form of LCA. It can also cause RP. This was approved in December of 2017. A very important advancement, not only for the retinal field, but for ophthalmology in general, as it did break significant ground. Early on in the trial for this therapy at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, people who were receiving the treatment, kids and young adults, had dramatic vision improvements. They were putting away their navigational canes. They could see the faces of their loved ones. Some could even see stars in the sky. And so Spark eventually was spun out of CHOP to commercialize this. Spark was ultimately acquired by Roche for a few $1 billion, and Spark continues to do development in the IRD space. But I think what's really important about this advancement, not only for the benefits it provided to the patients who have received this therapy, is that it provided affirmation to the research community that gene therapy was in fact an effective and relatively safe way to treat these conditions. And now we have a number of gene therapies in the clinic, what I'll call gene augmentation or gene replacement therapies. There are 3 trials now underway for X-linked retinitis pigmentosa caused by RPGR mutations. MiraGTx and their partner Janssen are furthest along in the clinic for this condition. They're in phase 3. They had some vision benefit reported in their earlier phase, and they hope, if results continue to be encouraging, that they'll seek approval, regulatory approval, sometime in 2024. Beacon Therapeutics is in phase 2. They're formerly the company AGTC. They too have reported vision improvements. They're working toward a phase 3. And then finally, 4D Molecular Therapeutics is in phase 1/2. What's a little different about their approach is instead of a subretinal injection, they're going with an intravitreal injection, which is potentially safer than subretinal. It's less invasive, though intravitreal injections into the middle of the eye have their own potential issues. But anyway, with 3 shots on goal for XLRP, hopefully we'll get at least one of these across the finish line. A company that we at the Foundation Fighting Blindness are invested in is Retina Therapeutics, which was co-founded by a world-renowned gene therapy researcher, Shannon Boy, and her husband, Sanford. They have 3 key projects underway. One is a gene therapy in a phase 1/2 clinical trial for people with GUCY2D mutations that causes LCA1. They reported vision improvements for the high dose recipients in that trial, and now they are planning a phase 2/3. They have officially, as I mentioned earlier, launched their X-linked retinoschisis gene therapy clinical trial, and they're also working on a gene therapy for Usher syndrome type 1B. That gene is big, so they need to develop a dual vector system. Progress is being made there as well. So another project that I wanted to mention briefly, it's also a gene therapy, but it's not replacing or augmenting the defective gene. This is a gene therapy to protect and preserve cones. As I think most of us know, cones are the cells in the middle of the retina, in the center of the retina, that give us central vision, daytime vision, visual acuity, and color vision. And so the French company Sparing Vision for a number of years has been developing this cone preserving gene therapy. It expresses a protein called rod-derived cone viability factor. And the idea is that this gene therapy can preserve central and cone vision independent of the mutated gene causing the disease. This is for people with RP, Usher syndrome, and potentially other conditions. It is in a phase 1/2 clinical trial in Pittsburgh and in Paris. They are targeting people with rhodopsin, PDE6 alpha, and PDE6 beta mutations initially, and they have dosed their first cohort at the low dose. And so this trial will continue to move forward. This research has been underway for more than 2 decades in Paris, so we're excited to see it finally move into the clinic for people with RP. Stay tuned. Now, another gene therapy that's not replacement or augmentation is called optogenetics. And the basic idea here is to provide light sensitivity to cells in the retina that survive after rods and cones. The cells that normally respond to light have degenerated in somebody with an advanced disease, an advanced retinal disease. And the image on the right side of my slide is a side view of the retina. It has the rods and cones toward the top, the longer cells, and I have this big X going through the rods and cones to signify a person who's lost all or most of their rods and cones to an advanced disease like RP or Stargardt disease or AMD. And the idea behind optogenetics is to deliver a gene to different cells in the retina that survive after rods and cones are gone, namely bipolar cells or ganglion cells. Those are further down in this diagram. They're part of the inner retina, and I have those circled. And excitingly, there are a number of companies that are in early clinical stage trials for this approach. And usually it is a gene therapy. Kiora is doing this basic concept with a small molecule, but all these companies, GenSight, BionicsSight, Nanoscope, and Kiora, have reported some basic vision improvements. People are able to recognize shapes, or maybe they can see movement or a path. It's rudimentary vision improvement at this stage, but for people who are down to light perception or even no light perception, this is meaningful vision improvement. Hopefully, as this technology moves forward in the current clinical trials and some of the more advanced approaches to optogenetics move into the clinic, we'll get even better vision improvement. But this is a gene agnostic approach. It's designed to work regardless of the mutated gene causing the disease of the patient. I also wanted to mention a powerful antioxidant that's in clinical trials. It's called N-acetylcysteine amide, or NACA. This is being developed by a company called Nacuity. They're in Dallas, Texas. They have a trial underway for this oral medication. It's underway in Australia for people with Usher syndrome. The idea here is to mitigate oxidative stress, which is a common pathway for vision loss in many retinal diseases. Nacuity is targeting Usher syndrome and RP initially, but it could be relevant to other conditions. They plan to report results very soon, hopefully in the next month or two. If the results are encouraging, they plan to launch sites for this trial in the US. Now, NACA is derived from an FDA-approved molecule called N-acetylcysteine. This is already FDA approved for a number of conditions, including acetaminophen overdose. Now, the challenge with NAC is that you need to take a lot more of it than NACA to get the potential desired effect. But NAC is also moving into a phase 3 clinical trial in the US and some other sites. That trial is being launched by Johns Hopkins and the National Eye Institute. That phase 3 will hopefully be underway later this year. So you have the more advanced version, NACA, potentially more potent and bioavailable for the retina, but then you also have NAC, which is already FDA approved for other conditions. So we'll see which of these works. Maybe both will work. Hopefully we'll get at least one of these to show some efficacy. And then finally, to close things out, I just wanted to talk about 2 Stargardt disease therapy clinical trials. One is from Alkeus, the other is from Belite Bio. For those of you that are familiar with Stargardt disease, you know that the underlying disease is caused by toxic byproducts that occur due to vitamin A vitamin A processing metabolism in the retina. We all need vitamin A for our retinas to be light sensitive. It's metabolized and processed in the retina. But there are toxic byproducts that are produced as a result of this metabolic process. In people with Stargardt disease, these byproducts don't get cleared from the retina properly, and they accumulate in deposits known as lipofuscin in the retina. So companies are targeting this pathway to minimize the accumulation of these toxic byproducts. Alkeus has a form of vitamin A that metabolizes more cleanly than vitamin A that we get in our diets. They're in a phase 2. They've shown that they can slow the growth of the disease lesions, the areas of cell loss in the retina, by about 30%. They're working now to see what their next step will be. They're working with the FDA. They're hoping they can get approval from the FDA without doing a phase 3. We'll see what happens there. Another company, Belite Bio, has a drug that is minimizing, that's reducing the uptake of vitamin A into the retina. That theoretically should reduce the toxic byproduct accumulation. They're in a phase 3 for people 12 to 18. And hopefully in the next year or two, we will hear results from that trial. And that's it. I hope I didn't go over time, but I appreciate the opportunity to talk about all this great research. Again, it's a hopeful time, and hopefully you have time for a couple of questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Yeah, I think we have time for one question. If anybody has one.
And for those of you that can't see, my email address is on this last slide. It's bshaberman@fightingblindness.org. That's B, S is in Sam, H is in Henry, A is in Alpha, B is in Bravo, E is in Edward, R is in Radio, M is in Mary, A is in Alpha, N is in Nancy @fightingblindness.org. bshaberman@fightingblindness.org.
Now Mike has a question.
Just Ben, Mike Smith here from Retina New Zealand. I just wondered, did you have any updates on the geographic atrophy treatments that were in clinical trials?
Sure. So that's a great question. We now have 2 FDA-approved geographic atrophy treatments. Syfovre from Apellis was approved back in February. And then RIYWC from RIYWC, which is now an Astellas company, was just approved earlier. Well, now it was last month, now that we're in September, in mid-August. So two options. These are both intravitreal injections to slow the progression of the growing lesion in people with geographic atrophy.
Are you aware of any feedback in terms of the efficacy of them? We had a very small trial running in New Zealand on the Apellis one, and there seemed to be mixed results, but the cohort was it was only 1 or 2 people in the clinic in Hamilton.
Right. So I'm going to be general here. There's more specific, detailed information, but in both the Apellis clinical trial and the RIYWC clinical trial, the treatment slowed the growth rate of these lesions, the areas of cell loss, by anywhere from 14–15% to up to 25 to 30%, depending on the trial, depending on the patient. So these aren't treatments that are by any means cures, but they're going to slow disease progression to hopefully preserve vision for a longer period of time. And if I may add just a comment, the fovea is this central part of the retina, this tiny pit, which is really key to visual acuity and sharp vision. And the idea in people with geographic atrophy is to slow the growth rate of this area of cell loss, this lesion, so it doesn't encroach in the fovea. And that's the real goal of these treatments, is to reach people early on before the fovea is affected so they can maintain their central vision.
Cool, thank you.
Sure.
Great, thanks guys. Next we have Dr. Ponticos. So Nicholas, whenever you're ready.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great.
Sorry, I think Ben is still sharing his
okay.
screen.
No problem.
Okay, thank you.
Let me share my screen, share my smaller screen, because I have a very wide, big screen, which will look strange if I share it, I think. Stop this, please. Great. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see it. Yeah, we can see it.
Shall I try and move? Yeah. Sorry, so I apologize. I have slides. I'll try and describe everything in my slides. Also, these are quite a bit of technical details, which I will try and explain in a understandable way. But if there's anything unclear, please put a message in the chat, or just I'm also okay if you interrupt me during them. Just ask if something not clear. Great. So my thought would be around 20 minutes. I hope that's okay, but let me know if I'm not running over time. So I think to complement the talk we've just heard, which is really great about the therapies, and what's really exciting to see what's being developed. At the same time that we're developing more therapies, we need to be able to, a lot of these therapies, not all of them, but a lot of them are targeted for specific genetic conditions. So being able to diagnose patients and identify their genetic diagnosis more effectively in the UK, where I'm based, but also all around the world, is going to be increasingly important. And we've all heard about AI and how it's something that is influencing society in many different ways, positively in some ways, maybe not so positively in others. But one of the positive outcomes, positive spins, I think, in applications of AI is to use it in the context of the medical space, and in particular in diagnosis. There's been quite a bit of work on using AI on medical imaging and applying it to common diseases, but my work is on applying it to rarer conditions such as inherited retinal diseases. So I'm a group leader at the Institute of Ophthalmology. My team is working on the data science side of things, so we don't do but we collaborate with doctors. We don't work so much on developing the therapies ourselves, but we work more on analyzing data, be it data from clinical trials or data from real world data. So I'm a group leader at UCL, and I'm also, I should say, the deputy director of data science at the Moorfields Eye Hospital, where I lead the data science team. So I don't think I need to explain to people here what inherited retinal diseases are, but they are basically conditions where a gene is affected, and depending on the gene, the condition can be quite different. Here's just some examples. I have a picture here with some of the retinal scans of patients with specific gene conditions. So ABCA4 is a very within the inherited retinal diseases is a pretty common one, which causes Stargardt. There's another gene which is more rare called EFAMP1, and USH2A, that's the one that causes retinitis pigmentosa, and choroideremia, CHM, that's another one that some people might be affected by. And there's a growing number of these genes. They're being discovered all the time. Obviously, the newer ones that are being discovered are tend to be rarer ones, but there is an increasing number, and so far there's over 270 genes that have been discovered, which are causing which are associated with inherited retinal diseases. Here on the right hand side, I'm showing a schematic of the cells in the retina, and what I'm showing is that basically different cell types have different genes which are predominantly expressed in them, and so that explains why, depending on which gene is affected and what cell type is affected, why the condition can look different phenotypically, which means, I mean, the retinal scans can look different, and they can progress differently as well. So yeah, I'll be using the term genetic diagnosis. And what that means is identifying the disease causal gene for a specific patient. So I just wanted to highlight the sort of numbers which are important when you're showing this to people who we like them to fund your research, just so they have an understanding of the sort of burden of this condition in the UK. And I haven't got the numbers for the global numbers, but I'm sure they are. Retina International has this sort of data and is gathering it. So sorry, let me close the door a second. So there's in the UK there's at least we estimate at least 30,000 individuals which have a condition, and it's a condition, as we can see from this group, is affecting a lot of younger individuals in particular, and working age adults. So the burden, if you talk about in health economic or socioeconomic terms, which is what the NHS and the national health care systems think of, it is representing a significant burden for the state. there's still quite a lot of patients which do not have a genetic diagnosis. In the UK, which has a pretty advanced genetic diagnostic system in place embedded in the healthcare service, even there, the number is still more than 40% of the patients do not have a genetic diagnosis. The health economic, the socioeconomic cost has been estimated, and this is a paper I think by Retina International, has been estimated to be quite huge. I'm going to try and read that number, but it's 523 million pounds, and I think that's a yearly estimate. But anyway, it's a significant burden, and a lot of patients still do not have a genetic diagnosis. The genetic diagnosis can take a very long time, even in systems with advanced services for genetics. So on average, it takes over 5 years. A timely genetic diagnosis is important. As we've heard, treatments and clinical trials, we're getting more and more of those. And so being able to, if they're gene-targeted trials, then obviously having a genetic diagnosis is essential for being able to participate in these trials. Then even if the condition is not treatable yet, it does give gives more information. And it can help in family planning, for example, and it can help in obtaining the right psychological support from patient groups, or can give an idea of prognosis. And in some cases, there's also some more serious conditions that can be detected that may be affecting other parts of the body as well. And so knowing the gene is quite important for that. And obviously, from the healthcare perspective, it does help the healthcare system knowing exactly what the condition is, and so they can allocate the funds, accordingly. Okay, thank you. Sorry. And here's an overview of a genetic diagnostic pathway in the UK. So there is over 30,000, as I said, individuals, we estimate with an inherited retinal disease. How they actually get through to getting diagnosed, they're often referred by an optometrist. I'd be interested in knowing here, for example, how many people were first seen by an optometrist, or how many people went directly to a specialist hospital. But this is what we believe the pathway to be, at least in the UK, where optometrists take quite detailed retinal scans as part of their routine care. And then if the condition is detected by an optometrist, the patient will get referred to an eye hospital. And then there's obviously a much smaller number of eye hospitals, so it might take a long time to get seen at an eye hospital. And in these eye hospitals, it's not just one person that does the diagnosis. Usually it's a multidisciplinary team combining doctors, geneticists, and all kinds of scientists, including people like myself working on the data side of things. And then at the end of all this, as I mentioned, we don't have a complete, even after going through this whole path, we do not have a complete, not all patients get a genetic diagnosis. So all these steps in the process are basically requiring limited access to limited resources, and in the UK, the resources are there, they're just maybe not always accessible. In other countries, the resources might not even be there, or they might have to see patients abroad or in a different country, or a different specialist very far away. So there's all kinds of, the accessibility to this type of service is basically quite disparate. So and the service, and also the expertise, the humans who are actually analyzing these images and this data, that this is also very difficult to get to. So what we want to do is to try and use AI to accelerate the diagnosis of inherited retinal disease, and I should add also to make it more available to more people. So this is what the Eye2Gene project is about. So in a nutshell, what we're doing is we're developing an AI which, if you give it retinal scans, it can identify what gene is likely to be causing the disease. Now, it's not enough to do a medical diagnosis, and you wouldn't go and treat somebody based on that prediction alone. You would still need a genetic test, which is the gold standard, to confirm the genetic diagnosis. But it would at least give you a high likelihood of a specific gene being which gene is likely to be affected in this individual, and you can then you prioritize the patient, for example, for genetic testing, or you can give the right genetic test to the patient if you have a choice of multiple genetic tests to apply, for example. It's another use for it is I have a sort of a flow chart which kind of shows what could happen if what happens when a company like a pharma company, for example, or a gene therapy company like RIYWC, I'm using here as an example, wants to find patients that they can treat. They will approach an eye hospital, for example, and they will ask the eye hospital, okay, how many patients do you have with, for example, RP65, which is treatable by Luxturna. Now, the eye hospital might have very good records about what patients they have, but also what can also happen is the hospital has a lot of retinal scans, but not necessarily very good records of what genetic diagnosis a patient has. So they would need to go and send the patient for genetic testing. Now, they can't send all the patients in the hospital for genetic testing. So the different steps in this flow chart just show the sort of interaction between first the gene therapy company would ask the hospital to send the patients. They would maybe and obviously the gene therapy in this case would pay for the genetic testing of the patients. The eye hospital could then run all the retinal scans through a system like the Eye2Gene AI system, and then provide a list of patients who do not have a genetic diagnosis but who are likely to be having, for example, RP65. Then the pharma company would pay a genetic testing lab, for example, Blueprint Genetics or some other genetic testing lab, to do the genetic testing. So this is another way in which this Eye2Gene AI system could be used for finding patients that are likely to be eligible for a specific genetic therapy, a gene-targeted therapy, sorry. Another way this is useful is when you get the results of a genetic test back, it's not usually just one answer, it's many possible answers. And being able to decide which answer it is between all those answers requires some expert information about what the disease actually looks like, what the disorder actually looks like in the retina. So this is where a doctor, a trained clinician with many years experience of looking at this retinal scans would be able to look at the images and say, okay, based on this information, and the information I have back from the genetic test, which is giving me multiple possible answers, which of these answers is likely to be the right one. So this is what we call genetic variant prioritization. And what I'm showing on the right is just a flow chart which shows the different bits of information that are needed for this. So there's information about the phenotype, information about the genetic test, and the mode of inheritance. And the Eye2Gene data comes also as an extra input that can provide that information. So to build this AI system, we need a lot of data. And the data we're using is retinal scans. And so what I'm showing here is three bar plots showing the three types of retinal scans that we use. You don't really need to know the details of this, but for your interest, you might have come across these terms. One retinal scan which is used a lot is called autofluorescent imaging, which basically shines a specific blue light, which shows specific layers of the retina. For example, the RP kind of comes across more. Then there's infrared imaging, that again, as the name indicates, is infrared, and it shows different other parts of the retina. And then the spectral domain OCT, and that's probably the most modern and interesting imaging type that is gaining a lot of it's being used more and more widely, and that takes 3D scans of the retina basically, and there you can really see very detailed layers of the retina. Interestingly, this is starting to be, these type of advanced imaging systems are starting to be deployed in opticians. And so we will be, in a few years, we will start being able to maybe diagnose these diseases more accurately, even in primary care, which means in an optician rather than in a very specialist hospital. One other thing that these bar plots are indicating is that the data set is quite imbalanced, which means that if we look at each bar represents the number of patients of a specific gene, we are seeing that ABCA4, which we know is a much more common condition, is quite highly represented, whereas all the other genes have a much lower prevalence. We haven't got all the genes here. There's 270, at least 270 I mentioned previously. Here we've got only 36. But one challenge is obviously as you get less and less images, examples, it's difficult. It becomes harder and harder to get enough data to train an AI to be able to detect these conditions.
Hi, Nicholas. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. It's
go
just
for it.
to give you a few more minutes. So maybe like 3 or 4 more minutes. So then
sure.
Maria
Okay.
can, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I'll get to the crux. So this AI system takes images, predicts the gene. We've tried it out and see how well it works, and it seems to be working pretty well. And we've tried it also on data from other hospitals, including data from Bonn, Germany, from Oxford, Liverpool, and Sao Paulo. And it seems to be doing quite well, given the difficulty of the task in particular. So we've compared it to what human experts would find, and it's doing much better than human experts. It's doing a top 5 accuracy of 70% versus 32% for humans. So yeah, it's a difficult problem because these conditions can be quite phenotypically look very different, even within a specific gene. But the system is doing quite well, so it seems very promising. Here's just a deep dive into the results. I'm not going to go over this. It is detecting things we know already. For example, for certain conditions, we are seeing that it's causing. We are picking up what we expect to pick up, but also it is also finding new sort of things, and in particular, it is giving us an idea of how similar the conditions are to each other. So here I'm showing a sort of tree structure which just shows you how similar the conditions are to each other, and that can be interesting to see whether patients may have the same condition or a different condition. The system is deployed online behind a password protected site, and this is just for user testing. We're testing this with doctors, just so they can give us some feedback. But this is part of a much sort of bigger program, and this is where I want to basically say, how can you help us with this? So we have a patient advisory group, which would be great if you'd be interested in joining. And we are working with also charities and other patient groups to build a larger, more representative patient group. Diana, somebody who I think is on the call, is leading this patient group, and some of the activities that patients are helping with is interviews and focus group surveys, giving us their feedback on how acceptable the system is for them and how useful it would be. And in particular, one thing we are currently doing is a patient survey. We're developing this, and we would like people to give us to run the survey past people. We are currently still designing it with the help of people here. But once it's ready, we would like to broadcast to basically to give it to a few people, to you, and help if you could help it distribute it as well. And this is really to help us understand how the potential for i2gene for patients, and what information to include in i2gene to make it useful for patients. So I think I'll stop there because I'm already over time. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicholas.
Sorry.
If you want to, oh, sorry.
No, I'm done. This is just my
Okay.
acknowledgement slide. I don't need to read it. You can. Yeah.
Yep. Thank you so much. If you want to share with me whatever you would like to share with the rest of the participants,
Yep.
I can send them a big email after this.
That would be amazing. Thank you so much.
Yep.
We have a website as well, i2gene.com. Just type i2gene.com in Google and you'll find it. You can there's more information there. But thank you so much. I'll send you the survey. I should say also thanks a lot for Marina for helping with developing this survey. And yeah, Retina International in general.
Great. All right. Next we have Maria Jose Ruiz. So whenever you're ready, Maria.
Yes, I'm sharing my screen. Can you stop sharing your?
Yeah, trying to stop sharing
Thank you.
mine now.
Okay,
Done.
I guess you see my screen in full. Yes. Okay, perfect. Give me a minute. Okay, so thank you to the Retina International Youth Council for inviting me to this nice event. I'm a PhD student at the Department of Physiology, Genetics and Microbiology of the University of Alicante. And I'm going to tell you a bit about my thesis project, but I will try to be as didactic as possible. And I hope that it serves to give you a point of view of how basic research works, but apply to a specific aim that is understanding the role of fatty acids on retinal degeneration. Let me introduce you first the research team I'm working with, because in science we do not work alone, we always work in team, and this team used to be multidisciplinary, what means that people in the lab do not only have their experience in one field, but that we count with experts in diverse fields. Like in our case, we count with biologists, biotechnologists, pharmacologists, physiologists, and even optometrists. And all these people that you see here in the pic work together focus on the study of the functional and morphological changes in the retina during the course of degeneration and in the search of genetic and neuroprotective therapies. To put you a bit more in context, I'm telling you a bit about our latest project. There is a family in the north of Spain that had heritage and mutation for a common ancestor and was diagnosed with an inherited retinal disease called central areolar choroidal dystrophy. They have a point mutation in a gene that encodes the protein peripherin, and that this protein is essential for the organization of the outer segments of the photoreceptor cells. What we did to understand the onset and progression of the disease was to create a mouse model that harbored the same point mutation of the family and to study what happened in the retina of these mice through the time. So we use different techniques to characterize in different aspects the retina of these animals to understand better the pathology that the family suffers. And this is a work that sometimes feels more like doing a Padlet than doing research. And how I'm doing my bit in all this work? Well, I apport my expertise that is studying the fatty acids in the retina of this model. And why fatty acids? Because fatty acids are highly enriched in the retina and they have a relevant role in its physiology. Indeed, the specific fatty acid composition of the membrane of photoreceptors impact in their proper functioning and even can determine the surveillance during the course of degeneration. The tool we use for study fatty acids is lipidomics. Lipidomics is a very sensitive and exhaustive technique of analysis that give us a profile of the fatty acid that form part of the retina. When we compare this profile of a control animal with the profile of an animal with the disease, then we can observe which changes are experimenting these fatty acids and how is this related to the course of the degeneration. Sorry. We applied this technique into models we have in the lab. We applied this to the model of central areolar choroidal dystrophy that I mentioned, but we are still working on that, so I cannot give you any update about this. But as we also apply this methodology in the RT10 mouse, that is a mouse model of retinitis pigmentosa, I can show you some results and some examples of what we get in the lab. So this is an example of these profiles I was talking about, and in that with this profile we can observe that there are many different fatty acids that form part of the retina, but only very specific fatty acids are altered in the disease, and even we can compare these changes in the fatty acids with the different alterations in the morphology of the retinal cells. For example, the omega-3 fatty acid DHA that is here represented in dark blue is drastically reduced, and we know that this is that the lack on this fatty acid is increased apoptosis of photoreceptor cells. And indeed, DHA is the main fatty acid of concern for clinicians, scientists, and patients, as DHA is being widely administered to patients with neurodegenerative diseases, and even there are 34 open active clinical trials that are supplementing DHA in patients with different retinal diseases. And why DHA is so important for the retina? Well, DHA is essential for the formation of the disc membranes of the outer side non-photoreceptor cells, but it's also a key structural fatty acid for the synapses. But it doesn't only have a role in the structure of the retina, but also plays pivotal roles for the anti-inflammatory state, and is also neuroprotective for the neuron cells. Nevertheless, how DHA is transported to the retina remains unclear. What we know so far is that DHA comes from the diet, and more concretely from food of marine origin like fish, crustaceans, and algae. But so once we ingest DHA, liver performs a series of interconversions and secretes to the blood torrent, and it travels in the bloodstream until the blood vessel that form the blood-retinal barrier. So here is first captured up by the endothelial cells that form part of this blood-retinal barrier, and we know that endothelial cells express a putative transporter for taking up the DHA that is called FSD2A. But here a question remains unclear, that is that once the DHA reaches the retina, how neurons catch it up? Those neurons express also this transporter for the selective transport of DHA. So we wanted to, I don't know if my slide is not passing. Wait a moment. Oh, no. Sorry, it's just a lot of here. So we wanted to answer this question. So we started to check out if MFSD2A was expressed in the different population of the retinal cells. For this purpose, we obtained retinal sections of fixed post-mortem human retina, and we use labeled antibodies that recognize specifically MFSD2A protein. So if we have a fluorescent signal in the retina, it means that MFSD2A is expressed in this tissue. These are some examples of the images that we observe, that we obtain under the microscope. So we confirm that the neural cells in the retina express this DHA transporter. So for finishing, I will leave a take-home idea that is basic research is slow, very slow, but but allow us to deep our knowledge in the disease mechanism, what is essential for reach one day an effective treatment for inherited retinal diseases. So thank you so much for all your attention, and thank you for the team and the support.
Thank you, Maria. That was very informative. Does anybody have any questions on any of the presentations? I also see that Marina shared a Google form feedback for the end of this session if anybody wants to fill that out. Not obligated, but encouraged. But anyway, any questions?
Laura, I only want to say thank you to Maria Jose because she's from Spain, and I know her work and the work of the lab of Nicolás Cuenca, who is a great researcher, and it is a great job that they are doing on the lab. And this research she was talking about is really interesting, and all our support and say thank you only.
Thank you so much, David. I have to say that our work will be nothing without the support of the patients' associations.
All right, I think we have arrived to the end of day one. As Laura mentioned, I put a feedback form on the chat. We really appreciate if you can take the time to send us some feedback about today's conference. It's only 5 questions. It's very quickly. For me, it has been amazing to hear all of you. I learned a lot with all the talks, learning like specific contents, and put myself to reflect on other issues as well. So thank you very much for being present. We are here tomorrow. We have a session tomorrow starting at 12 Central European time with lived experience. You'll be enjoying. David will be here with us as well. He's here today and he'll be there tomorrow. And towards the evening, starting at 5 o'clock, 5 p.m. Central European time, we will have a session in Spanish, 2-hour session, followed by a session in Portuguese. This is an innovation that Retina Youth Council is bringing to this event, so I hope you appreciate that. Stay tuned, as Ben mentioned earlier. And thank you very much. We wish and hope to see you all here tomorrow.